My name is Ann Moore. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how my husband's perfect mask cracked, piece by piece, until everything he built came crashing down, all within one unforgettable night. They say the greatest betrayals aren't shouted. They arrive in silence, in the way someone forgets how to look at you, how to touch you, how to love you. I used to think betrayal would feel like a lightning bolt, loud, unmistakable. But mine was a drizzle. It came slowly, seeping into my bones before I even realized I was drenched in lies. Ethan Moore, my husband of 8 years, was the kind of man who made people stop in their tracks. Tall, well-groomed, magnetic. He had this effortless charm that made him beloved in every room he entered. He was a real estate developer, hailed by the city's business journal as one of the top 10 to watch before 40. And I was his wife, quiet, supportive, always present in the background. A pediatric nurse at Trinity Children's Hospital. A woman who remembered anniversaries, packed his lunch when he had early meetings, and ironed his shirts with care he never noticed anymore. We met in college. Back then, he was a dreamer. We built our first home together with next to nothing in our pockets. I remember scrubbing floors in that old kitchen while Ethan hammered drywall. We said that house would be the foundation of our forever. But forever has cracks. The first time I felt something shift, it wasn't anything obvious. It was how Ethan's eyes didn't light up when he saw me. How his hugs felt like habits, not affection. How he came home late with excuses like, "Sorry, babe. Site meeting ran long," or, "The client needed one more walkthrough." I didn't question it, not then. I just smiled, made him dinner, and waited for the love I believed was still there to reappear. Then one evening, while folding laundry, I noticed a faint red smudge on the collar of his white dress shirt. Lipstick. Not mine. The color was too bold, too brazen for my usual natural tones. I stared at it for a long time, my hands frozen mid-fold, my chest tight like someone had just knocked the wind from me. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I told myself, maybe a hug from a colleague, a kiss on the cheek from a client's wife. Innocent things. Things you can explain away. But something in me, it knew. A woman knows. And so I began to watch. I noticed how Ethan would flinch when I reached for his phone. How he started locking his devices. How he'd run errands at odd hours. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was imagining things. But truth doesn't go away just because you're scared to see it. One night, I found a receipt in the glove compartment of our car, dinner for 2 at a luxury restaurant in Denver. The same night he said he worked late in the city office. There was also a hotel charge. And wine. And desserts we never ordered together. I felt something crack inside me. Not rage. Not despair. But clarity. I didn't say anything, not right away. I wanted proof. Cold, hard proof. Because if I confronted him with emotion, he'd gaslight me. He'd say I was paranoid. That I was too tired from the hospital. So instead, I turned to logic. I gathered the evidence quietly, like a surgeon preparing for a precise, clean cut. I started with his work laptop. Ethan was meticulous, but not meticulous enough. I knew where he kept the key to his locked drawer in his home office. That's where I found hotel confirmations. Dinner reservations. A file labeled K Designs. Inside it? Dozens of schedules. Meetings. All tied to a name, Kendra Sullivan. It didn't take long to find her. Kendra. Golden-haired. Smiled like a politician's wife. Owner of a boutique interior design firm. I recognized her from a few tagged posts in Ethan's Facebook photos, mostly company events. She always stood a little too close. Eyes lingering on him, hand brushing his. Then I discovered the worst part, she was married. Her husband, Dylan Sullivan, was a well-known attorney in Denver. Respected. Reserved. The kind of man who didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. It was almost poetic, really. Two betrayed spouses. Two carefully built lives splintering behind perfect facades. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed that night, staring at the open laptop screen. I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb, staring at the mountain of betrayal. Every fake business trip. Every lie Ethan fed me with that same soft smile I used to love. It was all right there, digital proof of a double life. I made a decision right then. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't fall apart. Ethan had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Elena Rivera, a former detective who now specialized in high-profile marital surveillance. Calm, methodical, and relentless. I handed her everything I had and told her, I don't just want closure. I want justice. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena gathered the rest. Photos. Videos. Dates. Times. Places. Ethan and Kendra weren't even discreet anymore. It was like they believed they were untouchable. Above consequences. But the moment I received that final file, packed with timestamps and photos of them entering a hotel at noon and not leaving until after dark, I felt something shift inside me. Not pain. Not hate. Power. The plan came to me in the quiet. A dinner party. Not just any dinner. The perfect trap. Ethan's business partner, Sam Harper, would be there. So would his wife Maria. And, most importantly, Dylan Sullivan. I reached out to Sam personally, pretending I wanted to rekindle old traditions. I told him to bring Dylan, say it was a casual get-together. I made sure Ethan suggested inviting Kendra himself. Like a proud cheater showing off his secret prize, blind to the sword hanging above his head. Every detail, every chair, every wine glass, was arranged like a chessboard. Because the moment Kendra walked into my home, pretending to be the queen of someone else's life, she had no idea her king was about to fall. The evening arrived cloaked in false comfort, smiling faces, polished silverware, and soft music playing in the background. But beneath the surface, every second ticked like a countdown. I had planned this down to the last fork, the exact angle of the lighting, and even the scent of the vanilla candle burning on the mantel. Ethan was unusually chipper, thinking this dinner was just another feather in his cap, a moment for him to show off. He complimented the roast chicken, poured wine like a practiced host, and flirted lightly with Kendra across the table in a way I was sure no one would notice. But I noticed. Everyone was seated exactly where I had intended. Sam at one end, Maria beside me. Dylan directly across from Kendra. Ethan at the head of the table, like a king seated on a throne he thought was secure. Kendra took her seat like it was her rightful place, legs crossed, red dress hugging her curves, eyes flashing with possession. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. And yet, the moment she laid eyes on Dylan, something in her slipped. Her smile stuttered. Her posture straightened. She hadn't expected to see him, not here, not tonight. But Dylan, calm and collected, simply offered her a small nod and lifted his wineglass. Dylan, she said, trying to laugh it off. Wow. What a surprise. Is it? Dylan replied coolly. You've always said you wanted us to have dinner together. Now here we are. I hid my smirk behind my wineglass. From the outside, it probably looked like any upper-middle-class dinner. Beautiful people talking business, sharing stories, clinking glasses. But I knew this was no ordinary evening. This was war, and I held every weapon. Sam asked Ethan about a new real estate development he had mentioned weeks earlier. Ethan launched into his polished pitch, eyes gleaming, hands moving with confidence. We're working with an amazing designer now, he said casually. Her ideas are really elevating the aesthetic. Oh? Maria asked. Who's the designer? Ethan hesitated a moment too long. Someone new. Very promising. Not officially contracted yet. Kendra shifted in her chair, her smile tight. Dylan's gaze never left her. Strange, Dylan said slowly. Kendra told me she signed an exclusive deal with your firm last month. She said it was official. The table fell quiet for a beat. Ethan cleared his throat. We're still figuring out the details. I'm sure you are, I said, my voice is light as silk. But you know, speaking of details, I've been keeping track of a few things myself. I stood up slowly, walked to the corner cabinet, and returned with a leather-bound folder. All eyes followed me as I laid it gently on the table in front of Ethan and Kendra. What's that? Ethan asked, his voice barely hiding his nerves. Memories, I said. Collected with care. I opened the folder, revealing photographs Ethan and Kendra entering a boutique hotel. Holding hands. Kissing in a private booth. Room receipts. Dinner invoices. Timestamps that matched the nights Ethan said he was working late. Kendra went pale. Ethan's face drained of all color. Dylan picked up one photo. His hand didn't tremble. So this is the boss you were always talking about, he asked, his voice now sharp. The one with the vision and values? Kendra opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Ethan finally spoke. Anne. I can explain. No, I interrupted. You don't get to explain. You had all the time in the world for that. You chose lies instead. I was there every night, Ethan. I was there when you said you were building something with me. Turns out you were building something else, with her. Sam stood slowly. Is this real? All of it? I looked him in the eyes. Every page. Every image. You can verify anything you want. Dylan carefully returned the photo to the table and stood up. He looked at his wife, the woman he had shared a home with for years, and said only 3 words, "We're done here." Then he turned to me. Thank you, Anne. For the truth. With that, he walked out. The door closed behind him with a finality that shook the air. Kendra tried to follow, stammering, Dylan, wait. But Ethan grabbed her wrist, desperate now. This is your fault, he hissed. You said he'd never find out. I laughed, cold, quiet. No, Ethan. It's yours. You had everything, and you destroyed it. For what? For a fantasy? Maria stood and walked over to me, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Come stay with us tonight, Anne. You shouldn't be in this house another minute. Kendra fled, tears streaking her perfectly contoured face. Ethan remained frozen in his chair, the king reduced to rubble. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, looking at the man I had once loved, now exposed under the bright lights of his own lies. And I whispered the final line I knew would echo in that house long after I left. You never deserved me. I didn't sleep that night. Not a single minute. Maria and Sam gave me the guest room at their home, warm sheets, soft pillows, kindness. But no comfort could quiet the storm inside me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, remembering everything from the evening. The looks on their faces. The silence after the evidence. Ethan's collapse. Kendra's humiliation. Dylan's calm, cutting exit. It wasn't satisfaction that kept me awake, it was mourning. I wasn't grieving for Ethan. Not anymore. I was grieving the version of myself who had once loved him so deeply. The girl who built a life around his words. The woman who defended him when others raised eyebrows. The version of me who lit candles and waited by the window because he said he'd be home soon. That woman died at the dinner table the moment I laid the folder down. The next morning, I went to the house one final time. Not to speak to Ethan. I had no interest in hearing apologies shaped like excuses. I returned to gather what was mine, my journals, my childhood keepsakes, my mother's ring, and the old photos I didn't want to leave behind. Ethan was there. He was sitting at the kitchen counter, the same one where we used to eat pancakes on Sundays. His eyes were bloodshot, hair disheveled, still in the same shirt from the night before. He looked like someone who had lost everything overnight. Because he had. And, he said, voice hoarse. Please. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the closet, pulled out the suitcase I kept under the bed, and began to pack. You can't just leave like this, he tried again. We can talk. We can fix this. I turned to him slowly. Fix it? Ethan, you broke something sacred. And the worst part? You didn't just do it once. You did it over and over again. You planned it. Lied about it. Covered it with flowers and fake smiles. It didn't mean anything, he said desperately. I stared at him, stunned by the absurdity of the phrase. You risked our marriage for someone who meant nothing to you? That makes it worse. He came closer. And I was lost. I thought I needed something else, but the truth is, I've never stopped loving you. You're the only one who really knows me. Please, just give me a chance. My voice was steady, even when my heart throbbed. No, Ethan. You don't get a second chance when you made your choices in secret for months. You don't get to beg for grace now that your game is over. I gave you years. I gave you loyalty, care, and every part of myself. And you gave it all away for hotel sheets and whispered lies. He stood there speechless. I zipped the suitcase, walked past him, and paused at the door. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I'm just done. Then I walked out and never looked back. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Ethan didn't contest a thing. He knew better. The evidence I had compiled made everything indisputable: adultery, financial deception, emotional abandonment. His lawyer tried to bargain in whispers, but mine responded in thunder. I got the house. I sold it within a month. I got my name back. I deleted his from every document, every account, every memory that tried to keep him tied to me. And then, I got my freedom. The apartment I chose was small, but bright. Modern. With a kitchen I actually wanted to cook in. With windows that let sunlight pour across the floors each morning. No shadows left. No ghosts. I chose the furniture myself, sleek, clean, all new. Nothing that reminded me of Ethan's preferences. No more cream-colored sofas or abstract wall art I never really liked. Instead, I hung watercolor prints from a local artist, soft pastels, and calming greens. I planted herbs on the windowsill. Basil. Mint. A new life growing on my terms. One afternoon, while arranging books on my new shelf, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? Anne? It's Dylan Sullivan. I straightened. Dylan, hi. I hope this isn't a bad time, he said, his voice measured. I just wanted to thank you again. For that night. You don't need to thank me, I said quietly. You deserved the truth. We both did. A pause. Still, not everyone would have had the strength to reveal it that way. You didn't just expose them, you did it with class. I smiled softly. Thank you. I'd also like to send over something, he added. Some legal documents. There are some financial ties between Kendra and Ethan's projects, possibly fraudulent. I think you might be entitled to compensation. I blinked. Seriously? Seriously. Kendra used Ethan's name and company to launder invoices. The DA is pursuing a case. I'll email the details. We spoke for another 5 minutes, cordial, polite. But under that tone, there was something else. A quiet understanding. Two people who had walked through fire and were still standing. After we hung up, I stared at the city outside my window. The skyline shimmered. The park down below was full of families. Joggers. Laughter. Life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in that picture. That was the day I knew this wasn't just survival. It was resurrection. A week after my call with Dylan, a thick envelope arrived at my new apartment, legal papers tied to Ethan and Kendra's entangled finances. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through pages that revealed a story far messier than I could have imagined. Kendra hadn't just stolen my husband, she'd used his business connections to funnel nearly $80,000 in fake design invoices into her personal account. She had billed Ethan's company for consulting work, interior mock-ups, even spa visits masquerading as client treatments. It was financial fraud. And Ethan, whether he liked it or not, was legally implicated, because his signature appeared on a few of those payments. I wasn't surprised when I got a call from a local journalist 2 days later. She wanted a comment. "You were named in the complaint as the whistleblower, Ms. Moore. Would you be open to sharing your side?" I declined the interview, but the damage was already rippling outward. By the following Monday, Denver's business circuit was buzzing with scandal. Headlines labeled Kendra the Queen of Scheme. Photos of her being led out of a law firm in handcuffs spread like wildfire across social media. A woman who once walked into my home with a flawless smile now stared at cameras, makeup smeared, eyes downcast, wrists bound. The public turned fast. Her boutique design firm shuttered within days. Her contracts vanished. Her accounts were frozen. The home she shared with Dylan, vacated. Locked up tight. As for Ethan, his descent was quieter but equally brutal. Sam Harper formally announced that Ethan was no longer a partner in their real estate consortium. "We hold integrity as our highest value," he said in a brief press release. Mr. Moore's recent conduct has made continued collaboration impossible. Other investors followed suit. Clients ghosted him. Projects were suspended. The Ethan who once strode through town shaking hands like a future mayor was now seen slipping into courthouses through back doors. I didn't rejoice. But I didn't grieve either. The truth was doing what truth always does, it cut deep and clean. And I was simply watching from a new life I had created for myself. At the hospital, things had shifted. Colleagues who used to overlook me now stopped to ask for my opinion. The head nurse, Ms. Clara Benton, started giving me more responsibility during chaotic shifts, handling triage, managing interns, mediating tough conversations with worried parents. One afternoon, after I'd successfully calmed a distraught mother whose baby had spiked a fever, Ms. Benton pulled me aside. "You've changed," and, she said, folding her arms with a knowing look. "You're sharper now. Steadier. Like someone who walked through a fire and came out with steel in her spine." I smiled. "I guess pain teaches you a lot." "It does," she agreed. "And strength shows." Later that week, she called me into her office. "We're looking for a new coordinator for the pediatric night shift. Someone calm under pressure. Someone with leadership. I'd like to offer you the role." My breath caught. "I know you've been through a storm," she continued gently. "But from what I see, you've become the kind of nurse people want to follow. Think about it. Let me know by Friday." I didn't need until Friday. "I'll do it," I said softly. "Thank you for seeing me." That night, I walked home through the dusky city streets, feeling the autumn breeze brush against my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, not because of who I was to someone else, but because of who I was becoming for me. The next morning, I received another unexpected call. It was Dylan. "And," he said, "do you have a few minutes?" "Sure. I wanted to let you know I submitted a formal statement to the DA. I made it clear your evidence was what helped uncover everything. I also told them you had no involvement, just clarity. Thank you, Dylan. I was also wondering, he continued after a pause, if you'd like to have coffee sometime. No pressure. No expectations. Just two people who know what it's like to walk away from wreckage and still stand. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, there was something honest about Dylan. Something steady. But the idea of starting anything, after Ethan felt both fragile and foreign. Still. I'd like that, I said. We met at a cafe tucked on a quiet corner near the courthouse. Dylan wore a soft gray sweater, his expression lighter than I'd ever seen it. He handed me a coffee, no sugar, just how I liked it. I looked through the rest of the invoices, he said. She was clever, I'll give her that. But not careful enough. I laughed, not at him, but at the irony. They thought they were invincible. They always do. We didn't talk about Ethan or Kendra after that. We talked about books. About travel. About the weird comfort of grocery shopping alone. About how it feels to rebuild a life, brick by careful brick. When we left, he didn't ask for another date. He just said, "Take care, Anne." And I smiled. You too. It's strange how healing doesn't arrive like a tidal wave, but rather in quiet moments. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly forget what Ethan did. But I did start noticing the difference in how I walked, how I spoke, how I carried myself. It was as if the weight he left behind had turned into something new, not bitterness, but clarity. A few days after my coffee with Dylan, I found myself walking through a farmer's market on a Sunday morning. The air was crisp. A little boy ran past me chasing a paper airplane, and I smiled, genuinely. It startled me. That feeling. Freedom. Peace. I paused near a flower vendor, fingers grazing a bouquet of wild tulips when my phone buzzed. It was Maria Harper. Maria, hi Anne, I know this is out of the blue, but I just wanted to invite you to something this weekend. We're hosting a women's panel at the community center. Nothing formal. Just strong women sharing their stories. I stared at the message for a moment. My instinct was to decline. But something told me not to. I had spent so many years shrinking behind Ethan's shadow, being the wife, the support system, the background to his success. Now? Maybe it was time to speak. I responded, count me in. The event was held that Saturday in a cozy room filled with folding chairs, string lights, and more resilience than I had ever seen in one space. Nurses, teachers, small business owners, single mothers, survivors. Every face carried a story. Maria introduced me gently. This is and more. Head pediatric nurse at Trinity Hospital. A woman I've come to admire more than she probably knows. I stepped up to the microphone, heart thumping, palms slightly damp. But once I opened my mouth, it was like something spilled out of me. I was married for 8 years, I began. To a man I thought would protect my heart. Instead, he broke it in silence. I lived for a long time in denial. I wore the ring, smiled at parties, cooked dinners, and swallowed doubt. Until one day, I found a card in his pocket. A thank you note, from another woman. There were soft gasps. I didn't scream. I didn't break plates or storm out. I gathered every piece of truth. Quietly. And when I laid it on the table, literally, it wasn't just my husband who saw it. His mistress did. So did her husband. The truth shattered them both. But it set me free. I paused. Some people think revenge is about rage. But for me, it was about reclaiming dignity. It was about showing that you can walk through betrayal and still come out loving yourself more than ever before. The room was silent. And then, the applause came, not loud, not wild, but heartfelt. Afterward, a woman approached me. Her eyes were glassy. Thank you, she whispered. For saying what I couldn't. That moment stayed with me. Because that's when I knew I hadn't just survived Ethan's betrayal. I had transformed. 2 weeks later, I was in the hospital cafeteria grabbing lunch between shifts when I heard a familiar voice. Anne? I turned. Dylan stood there in a suit and loosened tie, holding a coffee. I had a meeting at the legal office next door. Thought I'd stop in and say hi. I motioned to the seat across from me. Sit. I've got exactly 10 minutes before I'm summoned back to chaos. He grinned and sat down. How's it going? Better than I thought possible. We talked easily about work, life, and eventually, the hearings. Kendra had been formally charged. Ethan was now under investigation for signing off on fraudulent invoices. His name was being dragged through courtrooms, not conferences. Dylan tapped his cup. You know what amazes me? What? That we're not bitter. We should be. We have every right to be. But instead, we're calm. I nodded. That's because we both chose the truth over rage. The truth hurts, but it's clean. Rage? Rage keeps bleeding. He looked at me for a long moment. You know, I never thanked you. Not really. You don't have to. I do. Because if it wasn't for you, I'd still be living with a stranger. And I never would have seen just how much I was missing. He glanced down, then back at me. I don't want to rush anything. But I'd like to see more of you. There it was. A flutter of something warm. Not fireworks. Not lightning. Just warmth. Steady and kind. I'd like that too, I said. That night, as I walked home, I didn't think about Ethan. Or the lies. Or the way I used to cry into my pillow hoping he'd come home early. I thought about my own reflection, how I could finally look in the mirror and not see a broken woman. But a woman who rebuilt. One day at a time. The first time Dylan and I went out beyond coffee, it wasn't a date, at least that's what we told ourselves. He invited me to a charity gala hosted by the city's Children's Advocacy Foundation, an event both our careers supported. I almost said no. I wasn't ready for gowns, small talk, or to be seen beside someone again in public like that. But Dylan understood. We'll go as friends, he said. No pressure. Just good people, good cause. So I went. I wore a deep emerald dress, one I had bought after the divorce. It had no ties to Ethan, no memories clinging to the fabric. When I stepped into the ballroom and Dylan turned toward me, something in his eyes softened. You look powerful, he said simply. I smiled. Because I did. Not beautiful. Not elegant. Powerful. The night passed in a blur of laughter, introductions, and moments where Dylan's hand gently touched my lower back in ways that felt safe. There were no declarations. No big gestures. Just the presence of someone who didn't want to control me, only to walk beside me. We didn't kiss that night. But when he walked me to my car, he paused. I know we're still healing, he said. But I'd like to keep getting to know you. Not just as someone who's been through what I have. But as Anne. And I, standing under the streetlight, whispered, that's all I've ever wanted to be. After that, things grew, slowly. We didn't rush. We didn't define. But Dylan became a steady part of my life. He'd bring me breakfast on Sunday mornings. I'd bring him takeout when his court cases ran late. And in between, we built something neither of us had ever truly known before, trust. Meanwhile, the fallout from the dinner party continued its silent unraveling. Ethan's court date was officially scheduled. The charges weren't criminal, yet. But between Kendra's indictment and the growing list of clients pressing civil suits for financial deception, he was buried in legal chaos. His firm was all but dissolved. What was left of his savings went into lawyer retainers. I didn't reach out. He didn't dare. The only message he ever sent after our divorce was a single line: "I was a fool to lose you." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Kendra's situation, however, became the city's headline for weeks. The DA's office announced a plea deal in exchange for cooperation on uncovering further corruption in the real estate design world. She accepted, knowing a conviction would lead to jail time. But even with the plea, her name was ruined. Her license suspended. Her company liquidated. The last I heard, she had moved out of state. Alone. Stripped of the empire she tried to build on someone else's foundation. Justice didn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it was just the silence after everything crumbled. The absence of power. The stillness after the storm. And in that stillness, I began to thrive. As head nurse, I learned how to lead under pressure. I managed crisis cases, mentored new staff, and formed bonds with children whose pain reminded me of something I once knew: resilience isn't born, it's built. One afternoon, I walked into room 204, where an 11-year-old girl named Maya was recovering from heart surgery. Her mother had left 2 days earlier, never returning. Maya looked at me with tear-filled eyes and asked, "Why do people who say they love you leave?" I knelt beside her bed and whispered, "Sometimes people leave because they don't know how to love right. But that doesn't mean you're unlovable." She nodded, slowly. And squeezed my hand. That night, I cried, not because of sadness, but because I realized how far I'd come. From a wife betrayed in her own home, to a woman children trusted for comfort, truth, and hope. Later that week, Dylan invited me to his sister's birthday dinner. I hesitated again. This was different than coffee or charity events. This was family. "I want you there," he said gently. "No pressure. But I think you belong." So I went. And for the first time, I wasn't someone's plus one, forced to smile through whispered gossip. I was Anne. The nurse. The survivor. The woman who walked into a room and didn't need validation. Dylan's sister, a vivacious artist with wild curls, hugged me tight. "He smiles more now," she whispered. "That's how I knew you were real." When we left that night, Dylan didn't speak until we were parked in front of my building. "And," he said, his voice quiet, "there's something I've been holding on to. Not because I doubted you, but because I didn't want to rush." I turned to him, breath still. He pulled out a velvet box. Not a ring. A key. "To my place," he said. "No pressure. No timeline. Just, when you're ready." I took it. Held it in my hand like a symbol of everything I'd earned, not through love, but through survival. Then I kissed him. Soft. Steady. Real. Not to forget the past, but to honor how far I'd come. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of Dylan's apartment, our apartment now, watching the city lights flicker below. The sun had just set, and the air smelled like spring. That evening, I had made dinner. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, lemon couscous, and a bottle of red we both liked. We ate quietly, not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence was comfort. Healing had taught me that. After dinner, Dylan placed a hand gently on mine. "You're glowing lately." I smiled. "I think that's called peace." And it was true. I didn't think about Ethan anymore. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just with detachment, the way you might look at an old photo from another life and barely recognize the person you used to be. The final ruling on Ethan's financial case came in a week earlier. While he avoided criminal charges due to a lack of hard evidence tying him directly to embezzlement, the court found him guilty of gross negligence. He was ordered to pay hundreds of thousands in restitution to former clients. His real estate license was suspended indefinitely. What remained of his company was auctioned off to cover debts. He now lived in a rented apartment downtown, alone, unemployed, and irrelevant. As for Kendra, Her cooperation got her a reduced sentence, 6 months of house arrest, 2 years probation, and full asset forfeiture. The last public photo I saw of her was in a gray sweatsuit, exiting a Denver courthouse with her hair tied back and no makeup on, a far cry from the woman who once strutted into my house in red heels thinking she had one. But this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. It was about Anne. The woman who once waited quietly by the door with dinner in the oven and hope in her chest, and who now walked boldly through rooms owning her worth. One morning, a letter came in from Trinity Hospital's board. It was an invitation, formal, embossed on heavy paper. I had been nominated for the Excellence in Care Award, a recognition given annually to one nurse who had shown exceptional leadership, compassion, and resilience. Reading the letter, I thought about the nights I cried in the break room. The days I stitched smiles over pain. The times I stayed late with no recognition, simply because I knew the parents outside the door couldn't breathe until I told them their child was safe. I hadn't done any of it for applause. But standing on the stage that evening, award in hand, I felt every piece of myself settle into place. Whole. Seen. Reborn. Later that night, back in our apartment, Dylan wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You saved more than just yourself, you know. You saved me too." And I knew what he meant. We weren't the walking wounded anymore. We were survivors. Builders. Believers. We spent weekends hiking, slow mornings with books and tea, long walks through the park where kids played and flowers bloomed. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. And that's exactly what made it beautiful. I kept the key Dylan gave me, even though I now lived there. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me, trust is earned, not given. And sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the deepest love. One night, I got a call from Maria. "And," she said, "there's a spot opening on the hospital board. We need someone with compassion, clarity, and backbone. Someone like you." I laughed. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." "Let me think about it," I said, but my heart already knew the answer. It was never about revenge for me. It was about remembering who I was before the lies. And reclaiming her. Now, I sit at this desk by the window, pen in hand, coffee beside me, and sunlight pouring through the curtains. I write this story not because I need sympathy, but because I know someone, somewhere, might be sitting in the dark like I once was, clutching a lipstick-stained shirt, wondering what they did wrong. If that's you, hear me, you didn't fail. You didn't fall short. Someone else made a choice. And you? You have the power to make a better one. You don't have to scream to be strong. Sometimes strength is gathering the evidence quietly. Sometimes it's laying it on the table for all to see. And sometimes, it's walking away without looking back. So here's to new beginnings. To love that heals instead of hurts. To dignity earned. To voices reclaimed. And to the silent victories that echo louder than any revenge. Thank you for listening to my story. You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. If Anne's story moved you, let us know in the comments. Have you ever walked through betrayal and come out stronger? Share your truth below, and don't forget to follow Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories of resilience, justice, and redemption.